I hope you brought your biceps with you today, because today we're making Bernaise. This is one of those sauces that people freak out about because they think it's very complicated and they don't want to scramble the eggs, but it's really not that hard to do if you follow a couple key things, and we're going to go through them today. Basically, you're going to whisk eggs over a double boiler, incorporate butter, and that's the sauce. And it's not that hard, so let's get started. The first thing that we're going to do when we're making a Bernaise sauce is you need to make a reduction. Now, I've got a pot here, and we're going to add shallots to it. I have peppercorns. We're going to add 4, so that's 4 right there. I have some tarragon stems, and I'm going to put those in here. Now, you want a 1/3 cup of dry white wine, and you can use any white wine you have as long as it's not sweet. And try to use something that you would at least drink, okay? So I'm putting a 1/3 cup in there, and that's a 1/3 of a chef's measurement cup. And we're gonna put a 1/3 of a cup there. That's exactly 1/3 cup. And then we're gonna go ahead and put it on the stove, and we're gonna let this thing we're gonna bring it to a boil, and we're gonna let it reduce. When it's done reducing, it's gonna look like this. So now what we have is a vinegar that has been seasoned with the shallots, the peppercorns, and the tarragon. A note about the vinegars you're going to want to use for this, you want to use either tarragon vinegar or a good quality champagne or white wine vinegar. Don't use anything like distilled vinegar, because that vinegar is much too harsh for this dish here. Okay, so now we have our reduction, and we're going to go ahead and get the actual eggs cooking. Now I have a bowl. We're going to make a double boiler. I have water here, and I have it just to the point where you're starting to see a few bubbles form on the bottom. It's not moving. I want that heat. As you might be able to see a little bit of steam coming up, and that's what I'm looking for. I don't want too much of that. So I put those in here, and I can feel it heating up now. I have 3 egg yolks. We're going to put those in here. And then I have 1 tablespoon of our tarragon reduction. Now, once that's in there, we're going to start whisking. You want to find a whisk that has a sturdy handle, but it has to have good flexibility. There are some whisks out there that are too stiff, and that's not good for this process, because you need that flexibility to move this around. What you're trying to do when you're whisking a sauce like this or cooking the eggs is you're incorporating air, which is going to make the sauce light, but you're also kind of keeping this moving so that you can cook the eggs without scrambling them. And if you can take a look here, what you see is I'm getting a lot of air into this, and it's still really kind of runny. What's happening is I'm getting the heat to gradually start to cook this, and we're making a light custard. If you start to get you feel like this is getting too hot, you can remove the bowl and kind of work it to get it back together, and then put it back on. So don't think that once you put it on, it's a one-shot deal. So now I'm continuing to work this, and I'll start to see it gradually thicken. One note about this process here is occasionally I'll move the bowl, because that will help. And you want to move and keep the eggs working here. When you're whisking, what's really important is to use your wrist. I should be able to stand still and just through the wrist action whisk these yolks. I see people, you're using your arm and you're using your tricep, and then you're getting tired and you're working up a sweat. But the technique here is really to allow your wrist to do the work here. It's looking good here. It's starting to thicken up. Again, I'm going to move around to catch the edges here. And while we're working on this, I want to talk a little bit about the butter we're going to be using. Normally, you would want to use clarified butter, classically. But for this recipe, I'm going to use just whole butter that's been melted. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I think that the dairy solids that are in the regular melted butter are going to give it a little bit of a richer, smoother flavor. If you want to clarify it, you can. It's another step, and I just think it's unnecessary. The kind of butter I am using is unsalted, and you go to the store, you can get salted or unsalted butter. I recommend using unsalted butter because, one, the butter that's unsalted is fresher, because salt is a preservative and it gives the butter extra shelf life. But also, I prefer to control how much I'm seasoning when I'm cooking. I'm still working this sauce here. We're looking back at the eggs. It's coming along nicely. It's starting to thicken. The sauce, if you remember when we started, it was very orange because the yolks were very orange, and it's starting to get a little bit creamier color. It's all that air that I'm whipping in here, and it's starting to cook. You can see it's starting to thicken slightly. As you can see, if you're looking at this thing here, what I'm looking for is gradually I'll start to get ribbons in here. When my whisk runs through the yolks, the yolks will come back much slower, and that means the yolks are cooking nicely. People start to get a little gun shy at this point typically because they think the yolks are done, but you want to go until they're very, 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 very thick. And I think we're really close because as you can see, as I whisk here now, you're seeing it really getting nice and thick. You see how it's getting really fluffy now, and it's getting really nice and airy. Keep in mind, you want to make sure that you get this thing cooked all the way through, because if you don't get it cooked all the way through, it's not going to accept the butter the way you want it to. Okay? But you can see now already, it's very, very, it's almost like, it looks a little bit like a whipped custard, I would say, you know, like a vanilla sauce, and it looks really, really good. Now, you can make this, when you get good at this, you can really do it fast, just crank up the heat, but when you're starting out, take it slowly. Okay, we're really good now. If you see here, this is what a really nice, airy, cooked eggs look like. I'm gonna take it off the heat here. I'm taking it off the heat, just to double check to make sure it looks good. And I'm actually gonna turn the heat off on the stove because I want it to stay warm, but I don't want it to keep cooking my eggs. But this is what perfectly cooked eggs look like, or perfectly cooked eggs for hollandaise or Bernaise as we're making. So now I'm gonna start adding my butter. To start, I'm gonna just drizzle it slowly in here. And that's the key here. You don't wanna break the sauce. You're slowly gonna add the butter. The butter should be warm to touch, but it shouldn't be hot. If it's too hot, you're trying to equalize your temperatures here. If it's too hot, then you run the risk of breaking the sauce, okay? So we're adding this in slowly. As I continue to add this butter here, one thing I want to tell you a little bit of is that this Bernaise sauce is actually a derivative or small sauce off of a master or mother sauce, and that mother sauce is hollandaise. I'm sure you've heard of that. That's the classic sauce that goes on to eggs Benedict. Now, this is a great recipe and you can follow this. If you want to make hollandaise, it's all the same thing. The only difference is you would not put in all the tarragon. You don't put the tarragon in the end, and you don't put the tarragon in the reduction. You make the reduction the same way, but you just don't have all that tarragon in there. Now, I'm getting a little warm here, so I'm going to pull it off the heat, and then I'm going to continue to add more butter. Now again, this is 2 blocks of butter worth you're going to want to add in here. And I'm going to add just a little bit more here. We're going to whisking it in, keeping an eye on making sure I don't have too much butter added into this. After this last ladle that I'm going to put in here, I'm going to be just about done. But you see, I don't add more butter until I know that the butter that I've just added in is completely emulsified into the sauce here. Okay, so I've got my 3 yolks, I've got my reduction, I've added in 1 or 2 sticks worth of butter melted into the sauce, and I'm going to stop here. And what we're going to do now is we're going to finish the sauce. What I have here is chopped fresh tarragon. We're going to put that in there. I'm going to season it with a little bit of salt, just a little bit here. And then I have some cayenne pepper. I'm going to put just a dash, a very, very, very light dash in here. Okay? Now, that sauce is there. Got my seasonings in there. I'm going to stir it. And my Bernaise is done. Check for seasoning. What I'm looking for is a nice balance with acidity that I can taste the tarragon, a little bit of spice. If I need more, I can adjust it now. Okay, it's great butter flavor. I think it's a little bit light on the acid. So I'm going to add just a few drops of the reduction in there. Now, if your sauce is too thick, there's ways you can deal with that. You can add a little bit more reduction, or you can add a little bit of warm water. This needs just a little bit more salt. And there it is, our sauce is good to go. Now I'm gonna put it into a smaller container just so you can see me do that. And then I'm gonna keep this in a warm spot. It's important to keep it in a warm spot so that it doesn't break, and so that it's nice and warm when you're gonna serve it. A couple safety notes on this sauce here. You wanna make this and you wanna serve it within a few hours of making. Don't save it because it's got eggs that have been whipped in here. Once you make the sauce, use it for whatever your dinner or the lunch you're gonna serve it with, and whatever is left over, don't use again, throw it away. Here's our Bernaise sauce. We're gonna enjoy this with some veal a little bit later. We'll talk to you next time.